He was so desperate, he stole a loaf of bread to feed his baby, but what he didn't know was that the man who saw it on the store's cameras owned 500 Walmart stores, and he had a plan to change his life forever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights of the Walmart buzzed overhead as Jacob Miller stood in his small kitchen, the hum of his empty refrigerator matching the hollow feeling in his stomach. His daughter Lily tugged at his worn jeans, her small face scrunched up with hunger, tears streaming down her chubby cheeks. "Daddy! Hungry!" she whimpered, pulling harder at his pants. Jacob's heart clenched as he looked down at his beautiful little girl. Her brown curls were messy from her afternoon nap, and her big blue eyes, so much like her mother's, gazed up at him pleadingly. He ran his calloused hand through his disheveled hair, his eyes drifting to the pile of bills scattered across their scratched kitchen table. "I know, sweetheart," he whispered, kneeling down to her level. "Daddy's going to get you something to eat real soon." The bright red final notice stamps on the envelopes seemed to mock him from where they lay. The electric bill was 2 months overdue, and the rent wasn't far behind. His last paycheck from the factory had barely covered half of what they owed, and now there wouldn't be any more coming in. Lily's crying grew louder, her little hands rubbing at her eyes. Jacob picked her up, holding her close as she buried her face in his neck. The weight of her in his arms reminded him of everything he had to lose. His phone sat on the counter, and he knew he could call his sister Sarah. She'd help if he asked, she always offered. But the thought of admitting his failure, of showing how far he'd fallen, made his throat tight. He'd already tried the food bank earlier that day, only to find it closed until Monday. The community center's meal program didn't start until next week. He'd even checked under the couch cushions for spare change, finding only a few pennies and an old Cheerio. "Come on, baby girl," Jacob said, grabbing his thin jacket from the hook by the door. "We're going to take a little trip." The walk to Walmart felt longer than usual, each step heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. Lily had calmed down somewhat, content to be carried, and pointing at passing cars with quiet vroom, vroom sounds. The setting sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the evening air held a chill that made Jacob pull Lily closer. The automatic doors slid open with a whoosh, and Jacob stepped into the bright store. The familiar scent of fresh bread from the bakery section made his stomach growl. He adjusted Lily on his hip, trying to appear casual as he walked through the aisles. "Look at the pretty lights, Lily," he whispered, pointing up at the ceiling to distract her as they passed the security cameras. His heart pounded so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. The bread aisle stretched before them, shelves lined with different varieties. Jacob's hand shook as he reached for a simple loaf of white bread, the cheapest one he could find. Lily reached for it too, babbling bread in her sweet toddler voice. "That's right, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Bread for dinner." He wandered through a few more aisles, pretending to shop while he worked up the courage to leave. Every person they passed seemed to be staring at him, though he knew it was just his guilty conscience playing tricks. A young mother smiled at Lily as they passed, and Jacob felt shame burn in his chest. Finally, he couldn't delay any longer. His feet carried him toward the exit, past the registers where tired cashiers scanned groceries for other customers who could afford to pay. The bread felt like it weighed 100 pounds in his hand. As he approached the automatic doors, a security guard glanced in his direction. Jacob's steps faltered for a moment, but he forced himself to keep walking. The guard's radio crackled, and Jacob's heart nearly stopped. Lily chose that moment to wave at the guard, calling out a cheerful "bye-bye" that echoed in the entrance area. Jacob quickened his pace, stepping out into the cooling evening air. He could feel eyes on him as he walked away from the store. Looking over his shoulder, he saw the security guard watching him through the glass doors, his expression suspicious. Jacob's pace increased even more, his anxiety rising with each step. The bread was clutched tightly in his sweating hand as he walked faster, Lily bouncing slightly on his hip. She seemed to sense his tension, growing quiet and clinging tighter to his neck. The weight of what he'd just done pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. His mother's voice echoed in his head. Miller men don't steal. Miller men work hard and earn their way. But what choice did he have? The sound of Lily's hungry cries from earlier rang in his ears, drowning out his mother's words. The security cameras had surely caught everything. Even now, someone might be reviewing the footage, writing down his description. calling the police. His heart raced faster at the thought, and he had to remind himself to slow down. Running would only make him look more suspicious. Charlie Whitmore leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes fixed on the wall of monitors before him. The security command center hummed with activity, but his attention was focused on a single screen showing footage from store #247. He watched as a young man in a threadbare jacket made his way through the aisles, shoulders hunched, checking over his shoulder with every step. Something about this one was different. After decades in loss prevention and security, Charlie had seen thousands of shoplifters, but this man's body language spoke of desperation rather than greed. The way he held that single loaf of bread close to his chest, like it was precious gold, struck a chord deep within Charlie's heart. "Hold on there," Charlie said, gesturing to his technician. "Zoom in on his face." The image enlarged, revealing the man's features in sharp detail. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and worry lines creased his forehead. But what caught Charlie's attention was the raw anguish in his expression, the look of someone who'd run out of options. Charlie's fingers drummed against his mahogany desk as memories of his own past surfaced. 40 years ago, he'd been in similar shoes, struggling to make ends meet. The taste of those lean years still lingered. The empty cupboards, the shut-off notices, the gnawing worry that never seemed to end. "Sir?" His assistant, Sarah, appeared at his door. "Should I alert local authorities?" Charlie shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "No, not this time." He watched as the man slipped the bread under his jacket and headed for the exit. "Get me everything you can on him. Security footage from the parking lot, credit card records if he shopped here before, anything." Sarah nodded and set to work. Within minutes, she had compiled a preliminary report. "Jacob Miller," she read. "He's been to this location several times before, always paid with cash. Today's the first incident. Run a deeper check," Charlie instructed, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. The wealth he'd accumulated over the years felt heavy in that moment. 500 stores under his management, millions in profits, and here was a man stealing bread. It didn't sit right with him. The team worked efficiently, pulling up more information. Jacob's employment history appeared on one screen. 10 years at the local factory, recently laid off. A divorce filing showed up next, followed by custody arrangements for a 2-year-old daughter. Charlie's heart clenched. A single father with a toddler, recently unemployed. The pieces fell into place, painting a picture that was all too familiar. He remembered his own daughter at that age, remembered the terror of not knowing how he'd feed her next week. "Sir?" Sarah returned with more details. "We've got his address from previous delivery orders. What would you like us to do?" Charlie stood up, walking closer to the monitors. He watched the footage again. Jacob's furtive glances, the tension in his movements, the careful way he cradled that simple loaf of bread. This wasn't a criminal. This was a father at the end of his rope. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning," he said finally. "And get me directions to his address." Sarah looked surprised but didn't question him. She knew her boss well enough to recognize when he'd made up his mind. "Of course, Mr. Whitmore. Should I prepare any paperwork?" Charlie shook his head, his eyes still fixed on Jacob's frozen image on the screen. "No paperwork. Not yet." He turned to face his assistant. "Just get me that address. I need to see him myself." As Sarah left to make the arrangements, Charlie settled back into his chair. The security feeds continued their endless cycle, showing shoppers going about their business across hundreds of stores. But his thoughts remained with Jacob Miller and that loaf of bread. He pulled out his phone and made a few calls, setting things in motion. Whatever happened tomorrow, he wanted options ready. Sometimes, life came down to simple choices, like the choice between punishment and compassion. Charlie had been on the receiving end of both, and he knew which one had changed his life. "Here's everything, Mr. Whitmore," Sarah said, returning with a folder. "Jacob Miller's current address, background check, and the morning schedule has been cleared." Charlie took the folder, nodding his thanks. "Good work. Have my car ready for 8 a.m. tomorrow." He opened the file, studying the details of Jacob's life. The more he read, the more his resolve strengthened. The security monitors continued their silent vigil as Charlie made his plans. Tomorrow, he would offer Jacob Miller something more valuable than bread, a second chance. Not everyone would understand his decision, but Charlie hadn't built his success by following conventional wisdom. He closed the folder and stood up, taking one last look at the frozen image of Jacob on the screen. "Sometimes," he murmured to himself, The right thing isn't in any policy manual. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Will that be all for today, sir?" "Yes," Charlie replied, gathering his things. "Make sure the car's ready early tomorrow." "And Sarah?" He paused, turning to his assistant. "Sometimes people just need a helping hand. Remember that." As he left the security command center, Charlie felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the same feeling he'd had decades ago when someone had given him his first real chance. Tomorrow, he would pass that feeling along to Jacob Miller. Jacob sat at his small kitchen table as morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains. The stolen loaf of bread lay before him like evidence of his failure. His shoulders slumped under the weight of what he'd done. The ticking of the cheap wall clock seemed to count down the moments until his conscience would break him completely. He rubbed his tired eyes, still burning from a sleepless night. Every time he'd closed them, he'd seen himself walking out of that store, the bread hidden under his jacket. The shame of it made his stomach turn. From down the narrow hallway came the soft sounds of Lily's steady breathing. At least she'd had something to eat last night. He'd torn off pieces of the bread, watching her little hands grab at them eagerly. Her hunger had temporarily overshadowed his guilt, but now, in the quiet morning hours, it came rushing back. "What kind of father am I?" he whispered to himself, running his fingers through his unkempt hair. The bills scattered across the table seemed to mock him. Past due notices in bold red letters, final warnings, and threats of service disconnection. He'd never imagined his life would come to this. Jacob picked up the bread, turning it over in his hands. Maybe he could return it, explain himself to the store manager. But then what? The cupboards were empty, and Lily would be hungry again. His chest tightened at the thought. A knock at the door made him jump. The bread slipped from his hands, landing with a soft thud on the table. Jacob froze, his heart pounding. It was too early for visitors. Had someone seen him at the store? Were the police here? Another knock. More insistent this time. Jacob stood slowly, his chair scraping against the worn linoleum floor. He moved to the door, each step heavy with dread. Through the peephole, he saw an older man in an expensive suit. Definitely not the police. But somehow that made him more nervous. With trembling fingers, he unlocked the door and opened it just enough to see the stranger clearly. The man's face was kind, his eyes warm despite his formal appearance. "Jacob Miller?" the man asked, his voice gentle but firm. Jacob nodded, unable to find his voice. "I'm Charlie Whitmore. I own several Walmart franchises, including the one you visited last night." The words hit Jacob like a physical blow, and he gripped the doorframe to steady himself. "May I come in? I'd like to talk." Jacob's first instinct was to shut the door, grab Lily, and run. But something in Charlie's expression held him back. Wordlessly, he stepped aside, letting the older man enter. Charlie glanced around the small apartment, taking in the peeling wallpaper and the water stains on the ceiling. His eyes lingered on the bread on the table, but his expression remained neutral. "I saw you on our security cameras," Charlie said, turning to face Jacob. "I saw a father doing whatever he could to feed his child." Jacob's face burned with shame. He wanted to defend himself, explain his circumstances, but the words stuck in his throat. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Charlie continued, reaching into his suit jacket. Jacob tensed, but Charlie only pulled out a checkbook. "I want to help. I don't need charity," Jacob said quickly, finding his voice at last. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but pride was all he had left. Charlie smiled slightly. "I grew up poor myself. I know what it's like to watch your child go hungry. Let me help you get back on your feet." He started writing on the check. "Please don't," Jacob said, his voice cracking. He looked down the hallway toward Lily's room, then back at Charlie. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't accept your money. I need to figure this out on my own." Charlie stopped writing and studied Jacob for a moment. "You remind me of myself at your age. Too proud to accept help. Too stubborn to see that sometimes we all need a hand up." A small whimper came from Lily's room, followed by the sound of her stirring. Jacob's heart clenched. He didn't want her to see this, to somehow understand her father's shame. Charlie seemed to sense his distress. He tucked the checkbook away and straightened his jacket. "All right, how about this instead? I have a position open at one of my stores. It's honest work, and you'll earn every penny." Jacob hesitated. Taking a job from the man who caught him stealing felt wrong somehow. But wasn't this better than charity? "You have something that can't be bought, Hart," Charlie said, his voice sincere. "I saw it in how you were willing to risk everything for your daughter. That's the kind of person I want working for me." The sounds of Lily moving around in her room grew louder. Jacob looked at the bread on the table, then at Charlie's outstretched hand. His pride warred with his desperation, with his need to provide for his daughter. Finally, slowly, he reached out and shook Charlie's hand. "Okay," he said quietly, the word heavy, with both relief and uncertainty. "I'll take the job." Jacob stood at the entrance of the Walmart store early the next morning, his work shirt still stiff with newness. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, releasing a blast of cool air. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped inside, remembering how just days ago he'd walked through these same doors with very different intentions. "You must be Jacob," a woman's voice called out. She approached with quick, purposeful steps. "I'm Lisa, the store manager." Her handshake was firm and professional, matching her neat appearance and direct gaze. "Charlie called ahead about you. Let's get started with the tour." Lisa led Jacob through the store, pointing out different departments and explaining procedures. Her words came fast and businesslike, and Jacob struggled to keep up with all the information. They passed by employees getting ready for opening, some giving curious glances his way. "And this," Lisa said, pushing through a set of heavy double doors, "is where you'll be spending most of your time." The back room stretched out before them, filled with towering shelves and wrapped pallets waiting to be unloaded. "We get truck deliveries 4 times a week. Your main responsibilities will be unloading, organizing inventory, and keeping this area clean." Jacob nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. The back room was massive, and the task seemed overwhelming. Lisa must have noticed his expression because her tone softened slightly. "Don't worry, Mike will show you the ropes today." She gestured to a stocky man organizing boxes nearby. "He's been with us for 5 years and knows this back room better than anyone." Mike gave a friendly wave and walked over. His well-worn work shirt and easy smile made Jacob feel a bit more at ease. "Welcome aboard," Mike said. "Ready to get started?" The next few hours were a blur of heavy lifting and constant movement. Jacob's muscles burned as he helped Mike unload boxes from the delivery truck. The summer heat turned the loading dock into an oven, and sweat soaked through his new uniform. Every time he thought they were making progress, more boxes appeared. "You're doing all right," Mike said during their break. They sat on overturned milk crates, drinking water from plastic bottles. "First day's always the toughest. You'll get used to the pace." Jacob wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Thanks. I appreciate the help." His pride stung a little watching other employees move with practiced efficiency, knowing exactly where everything belonged. He felt clumsy and slow in comparison. Around midday, Charlie appeared in the back room. He walked through casually, stopping to chat with various employees. When he reached Jacob, he simply nodded and smiled. "Good to see you here, Jacob. How's it going?" "I'm managing, sir," Jacob replied, straightening up despite his aching back. "Just Charlie, remember?" The older man's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Keep at it. This place has a way of feeling like home before you know it." Those simple words of encouragement stayed with Jacob throughout the afternoon. As he swept the back room floor and organized shelves, he found himself thinking about Lily. Each box he lifted, each task he completed, was one step closer to giving her the life she deserved. Lisa checked on him periodically, offering brief but helpful tips. "Make sure to lift with your legs," she'd say, or "Those cleaning supplies go in section C4. Her matter-of-fact guidance helped Jacob feel less lost in the vast space. By the end of his shift, Jacob's muscles screamed in protest, and his feet felt like lead. But beneath the exhaustion, a tiny spark of accomplishment flickered. He'd made it through his first day. He hadn't quit or failed or let his pride get the better of him. The babysitter, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, greeted him with a warm smile when he finally made it home. "Lily was an angel," she assured him. "She just went down for the night about an hour ago." Jacob thanked her and quietly made his way to Lily's room. The nightlight cast soft shadows on the walls as he approached her crib. There she lay, peaceful and perfect, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Her favorite stuffed bunny was clutched tightly in one hand. Sinking into the old rocking chair beside the crib, Jacob watched his daughter sleep. His body ached, and his pride still smarted from accepting help. But looking at Lily made it all worthwhile. She deserved everything he could give her and more. He reached through the crib bars and gently stroked her small hand. Tomorrow would bring another day of hard work. More boxes to lift, more floors to clean. But for the first time in weeks, Jacob felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. It wasn't much, just a small flame in the darkness, but it was there. Charlie's quiet faith in him, Lisa's straightforward guidance, Mike's patient teaching, they had all contributed to that spark. Jacob watched Lily's peaceful face and made a silent promise. He would make this work. For her, he would swallow his pride, learn what he needed to learn, and become someone she could be proud of. The gentle creaking of the rocking chair filled the quiet room as Jacob sat with his sleeping daughter, letting the peace of the moment wash over him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, this was enough. This quiet room, his sleeping child, and the small, steady flame of hope in his heart. Jacob pushed the heavy cart down the aisle, his movements more confident now than they had been during his first week. The boxes of merchandise no longer felt like puzzles he couldn't solve. He knew where everything went, and his muscles had gotten used to the constant lifting and moving. "Hey, Jacob," Tom called from the end of the aisle. "Need a hand with those?" Tom was about Jacob's age, with an easy smile and a way of making even the most tedious tasks seem manageable. He'd been at the store for 5 years and knew every corner of it. "I've got it," Jacob replied, carefully arranging cereal boxes on the shelf. "But thanks." "Looking good," Tom said, nodding at Jacob's work. "You're getting the hang of it. Want to learn something new?" Jacob straightened up, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. "What did you have in mind?" "Lisa mentioned you might be ready for register training. I could show you the basics during your break." The offer made Jacob's heart skip a beat. Register duty meant trust, responsibility, a step up from just stocking shelves. Really? That'd be great. During his lunch break, Tom walked Jacob through the register operations. The computer system wasn't as complicated as Jacob had feared, and Tom's patient explanations made everything clear. "See? It's not rocket science," Tom said, watching Jacob complete a practice transaction. "You're a natural." Later that afternoon, Lisa stopped by while Jacob was organizing the storage room. She stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, observing his work. "Tom tells me you picked up the register system pretty quickly," she said, making a note. "How are you finding everything?" Jacob paused, setting down a box of paper towels. "Good. Really good, actually. Everyone's been helpful." Lisa nodded, her expression professional but approving. "I've noticed you're getting here early, staying late when needed. That kind of initiative doesn't go unnoticed." She flipped through her papers. "I'm adding you to register rotation starting next week, and I'd like you to help train the new stock boy coming in on Thursday." Pride swelled in Jacob's chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Thank you, Lisa. I won't let you down." At home that evening, Jacob watched Lily play with her blocks on the living room floor. She seemed more content these days, perhaps picking up on his improved mood. He'd been able to buy her new clothes and even a few small toys with his first paycheck. "Daddy, look." Lily held up a tower of blocks, beaming with pride. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Jacob said, his heart full. He remembered the desperate man he'd been just weeks ago, stealing bread to feed his daughter. Now he could provide for her honestly, watching her grow without that constant gnawing fear in his stomach. The next morning, Charlie appeared at the store during Jacob's shift. He stood back, watching as Jacob helped a customer find the right size diapers, answering questions with growing confidence. After the customer left, Charlie approached. "Got a minute, Jacob?" They walked to the break room, which was empty at this hour. Charlie pulled out a chair and gestured for Jacob to sit. "Lisa's been keeping me updated on your progress," Charlie said, his eyes kind but evaluating. "She says you're one of the quickest learners she's had in a while." Jacob felt his face warm at the praise. "I'm just trying to do my best, sir." Charlie leaned forward, his expression serious. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're not just putting in hours, Jacob. You're investing yourself in this work. I see how you treat the customers, how you've been helping the other employees." He paused, studying Jacob's face. "I was right about you. There's real potential there." Jacob struggled to find words. This man had given him a second chance when he deserved none, and now he was sitting here telling him he had potential? "You're on the right track," Charlie continued. "Keep going like this, and there's no telling where you might end up. This business needs people who care, people with heart." Jacob thought about how far he'd come in just 2 weeks. From stealing bread to earning honest wages. From shame to pride. From desperation to hope. He looked at Charlie, the man who had made it all possible, and managed to say, "Thank you, sir, for everything." Charlie waved away his thanks. "You're doing the work, Jacob. I just opened the door." He stood up, straightening his jacket. "Now, get back out there. I believe you have some new register duties to master." Jacob returned to the sales floor, his step lighter than before. The store buzzed with activity around him. Customers shopping, employees restocking shelves, registers beeping. It was no longer just noise to him. It was the sound of possibility, of a future he could build for himself and Lily. Tom caught his eye from across the aisle and gave him a thumbs up. Jacob smiled back, then turned to help an elderly customer reaching for something on a high shelf. This was more than just a job now. It was a chance to prove to himself, to Charlie, and most importantly to Lily, that he could be the man he'd always wanted to be. The morning light streamed through the store's windows, casting long shadows across the freshly waxed floors. Jacob grabbed his cart of merchandise and headed down the aisle, ready to face whatever challenges the day might bring. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The shrill ring of Jacob's phone cut through the early morning silence. He fumbled for it on his nightstand, careful not to wake Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully in her small bed across the room. The clock showed 6:15 a.m. "Hello?" Jacob whispered, stepping into the hallway. "Jacob, it's Charlie. Hope I didn't wake you." Charlie's warm voice came through clearly. "I've been watching your progress these past few weeks, and I'm impressed." "Thank you, sir." Jacob leaned against the wall, his heart beating a little faster. "How would you like to learn more about managing the store?" The question caught Jacob off guard. He ran his hand through his hair, thoughts racing. "Managing? I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You've got something special, Jacob. The way you handle yourself, how you treat the customers and your co-workers, that's not something that can be taught." Charlie's voice carried the weight of experience. "The technical stuff? That's the easy part. What matters is heart, and you've got plenty of that." Jacob glanced back at his apartment door, thinking of Lily sleeping inside. "I appreciate the offer, but I've only been here a few weeks. There must be others more qualified." "Let me ask you something," Charlie interrupted gently. "Do you want more for yourself and Lily?" The question hit home. "Of course I do." "Then let me help you get there. No pressure, no expectations, just an opportunity to learn and grow." After a moment's hesitation, Jacob agreed. "Okay, I'll do it." "Excellent. Come in an hour early today. I'll meet you there." When Jacob arrived at the store that morning, Charlie was already waiting. The older man's face lit up with a warm smile as Jacob approached. The store was quiet, with only a few early morning workers preparing for opening. "First lesson," Charlie said, leading Jacob to the office, "is understanding the bigger picture." He pulled out a thick binder filled with spreadsheets and reports. "This might look overwhelming, but it's just numbers telling a story." Over the next few hours, Charlie walked Jacob through the basics of inventory management, explaining how to track stock levels and predict what customers would need. Jacob found himself drawn in by Charlie's enthusiasm and clear explanations. "See these patterns?" Charlie pointed to a series of numbers. "This tells us when to order more winter clothes, even before the season starts." Jacob leaned in, fascinated. "I never thought about all the planning that goes into it." Throughout the day, Charlie showed Jacob different aspects of running the store. They walked the aisles together, and Charlie demonstrated how to spot areas that needed attention. "Notice how this display feels cluttered?" Charlie gestured to a shelf of household items. "Sometimes less is more. We want customers to feel comfortable, not overwhelmed." Jacob absorbed everything, asking questions and taking mental notes. When a customer approached with a complaint about a product, Charlie let Jacob observe how he handled it with patience and understanding. "The key," Charlie explained afterward, "is to really listen. People want to feel heard." During lunch break, they sat in the break room, and Charlie shared stories from his own journey up the corporate ladder. "I started just like you know, single parent, struggling to make ends meet." Jacob looked up from his sandwich, surprised. "Really?" Charlie nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "My daughter was 4 when my wife passed away. I was terrified of failing her, but someone gave me a chance, just like I'm giving you one now." The afternoon brought more practical lessons. Charlie taught Jacob how to read sales reports, schedule staff, and handle vendor relationships. What had seemed impossibly complex in the morning began to make sense. "You're getting this faster than I expected," Charlie commented as they reviewed the day's training. Jacob felt a warmth spread through his chest at the praise. For the first time in years, he could see a path forward, not just surviving, but building something meaningful. When his shift ended, Jacob headed to pick up Lily from daycare. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she ran into his arms with a squeal of delight. "Daddy!" At home, Jacob prepared dinner while Lily colored at the kitchen table. He'd splurged a little at the grocery store this week, buying ingredients for her favorite spaghetti and meatballs. The sauce simmered on the stove, filling their small apartment with a homey aroma. "Look, Daddy." Lily held up her drawing, a rainbow of scribbles that made Jacob smile. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." He hung it on the fridge with a magnet, right next to her other masterpieces. As they sat down to eat, Jacob watched Lily twirl spaghetti around her fork, sauce smeared across her cheeks. She hummed happily between bites, completely content in their simple moment together. Looking at his daughter's joy-filled face, Jacob felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. He was building a future, one where Lily would have opportunities he never had. The pride he felt wasn't just about the job or the possibility of advancement. It was about becoming the father she deserved. Lily smiled up at him, sauce still decorating her face. "Yummy, Daddy." Jacob reached across the table to wipe her cheek with a napkin, his heart full. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt true hope for their future. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the Walmart store as Jacob arranged a display of children's toys. His movements were precise and careful, something he'd learned over the past few weeks. A small smile played on his lips as he thought about how far he'd come from that desperate night when he'd stolen a loaf of bread. "Looking good, Jacob." Lisa, the store manager, called out as she passed by. "Those sales numbers from your section last week were impressive." "Thanks, Lisa." Jacob stood up, brushing off his uniform. Pride swelled in his chest, a feeling that was becoming more familiar lately. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A new picture from Mrs. Thompson, Lily's daycare teacher, showed his daughter finger painting. Her face lit up with joy. These little updates throughout the day meant everything to him. Thanks to his steady paycheck, he could now afford proper childcare, and Lily was thriving. The morning passed quickly as Jacob moved from task to task. He'd learned to balance multiple responsibilities, helping customers, managing inventory, and training new employees. Charlie's mentorship had opened doors he never thought possible. At lunch break, Jacob sat in the break room, reviewing some management training materials Charlie had given him. The words on the page blurred as he thought about Lily's upcoming birthday. For the first time, he could afford to buy her a proper present. "Jacob?" One of the junior managers poked his head into the break room. "Charlie wants to see you in his office." Jacob's heart skipped a beat. Charlie usually didn't make unexpected office calls. He gathered his things and headed to the executive wing, where Charlie's office overlooked the store floor. Charlie sat behind his desk, looking more tired than usual. The usually warm smile was replaced with a tight-lipped expression that made Jacob's stomach clench. "Have a seat, son." Charlie gestured to the chair across from him. Jacob lowered himself slowly, noting the stack of papers on Charlie's desk. Financial reports. From the look of them, "I'm going to be straight with you, Jacob," Charlie began, his voice heavy. "We're facing some serious financial challenges. The economy's taken a downturn and it's hitting us harder than expected." The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright. Jacob's throat went dry. "How bad is it?" Charlie leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his silver hair. "Bad enough that we're looking at making some significant cuts across all stores. Corporate's breathing down my neck about reducing overhead." Jacob's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. All the progress he'd made, all the stability he'd built for Lily. It felt like it was balancing on the edge of a cliff. "You've been doing excellent work, Jacob," Charlie continued, his eyes kind but worried. "I want you to know that. The way you've stepped up, how quickly you've learned. It's exactly what I saw in you that first day. But," Jacob's voice came out barely above a whisper, "but we're going to have to make some tough decisions in the coming weeks. Nothing's certain yet, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We're looking at possibly reducing staff across all departments." The room seemed to spin slightly. Jacob thought of Lily's daycare bills, the rent he'd finally caught up on, the small savings account he'd started building. "I understand," he managed to say, though he didn't really understand at all. "Keep doing what you're doing," Charlie advised, leaning forward. You're one of our strongest performers, Jacob. Just be prepared. That's all I'm saying." Jacob nodded mechanically and stood up. His legs felt like lead as he walked back to the store floor. The cheerful displays and busy aisles now seemed mockingly bright. Throughout the afternoon, Jacob threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. He helped twice as many customers, organized 3 additional displays, and stayed late to assist with inventory. His muscles ached, but he couldn't stop. Each task felt like a desperate argument for his continued employment. Mrs. Thompson sent another photo of Lily, this time sleeping peacefully during nap time. The sight of her innocent face made his chest tight. He couldn't fail her. Not again. At closing time, Jacob gathered his things from his locker, his movements slow and heavy. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and worry. He kept thinking about Charlie's words, about the uncertainty ahead. Just as he pulled into his apartment complex's parking lot, his phone pinged with a new email. The sender was Charlie Whitmore. Jacob's hands shook slightly as he opened it. The message was brief but clear. "Dear employees, due to current economic conditions, we regret to inform you that some positions may be affected in the coming weeks. Individual meetings will be scheduled to discuss potential changes. Your dedication to the company is valued, and any decisions will not be made lightly." Jacob sat in his car, the phone's blue light illuminating his face in the darkness. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. Through his windshield, he could see the light on in his apartment window, where Mrs. Thompson would be waiting with Lily. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The email felt like a noose tightening around his neck, threatening to undo everything he'd worked so hard to build. But Lily was waiting, and he couldn't let her see his fear. Not tonight. Not ever. Jacob sat at his small kitchen table, sorting through a pile of job applications. The morning light streamed through the window, casting shadows across the papers. Lily was in her playpen nearby, contentedly stacking plastic blocks and humming to herself. His phone buzzed on the table. Charlie's name flashed across the screen. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. He'd been waiting for news about the layoffs all week. "Hello?" His voice came out steadier than he felt. "Jacob." Charlie's familiar warm tone carried a weight he'd never heard before. "I need to talk to you about something important." Jacob's fingers tightened around the phone. In the background, he could hear Lily knock over her tower of blocks with a delighted squeal. "I'm sorry, Jacob," Charlie said, his voice heavy with regret. "I've had to make the tough decision to let you go." The words hit Jacob like a physical blow. He sat there, frozen, as Charlie continued talking about severance pay and final arrangements. The room seemed to tilt sideways, and the morning sunshine suddenly felt too bright, too harsh. "I want you to know this isn't about your performance," Charlie was saying. "You've been exceptional. This is purely about numbers and corporate decisions beyond my control." Jacob managed to find his voice. "I understand." But he didn't. Not really. The progress he'd made, the stability he'd built, it was all crumbling away. "There will be 2 weeks severance pay," Charlie explained. "And of course, I'll be happy to provide a strong reference for any future positions." "Thank you," Jacob replied mechanically. His eyes drifted to Lily, who was now attempting to fit a square block into a round hole. She looked up and gave him a toothy grin, completely unaware that their world was shifting beneath them. After ending the call, Jacob sat motionless at the table. The job applications in front of him seemed to mock him now. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed them aside. The familiar shame crept back in, the same feeling he'd had that night at Walmart with the stolen bread. He'd thought he was past this, thought he'd finally found his footing, but here he was again, back at square one. Lily's blocks clattered to the floor, and she let out a frustrated whimper. Jacob moved automatically to help her, picking up the scattered toys. She reached for him, and he lifted her into his arms, breathing in the sweet baby powder smell of her hair. "Data sad?" she asked, patting his cheek with her tiny hand. "No, baby," he lied, forcing a smile. "Daddy's just thinking." He carried her to the kitchen and started preparing her lunch, simple peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. His movements were mechanical as his mind raced through options. His savings wouldn't last long. The rent was due in 2 weeks. Daycare fees needed to be paid. Pride kept him from reaching for his phone to call Charlie back, to beg for another chance or even just advice. He'd already received so much help. more than he deserved. The thought of asking for more made his stomach turn. As he cut Lily's sandwich into small squares, his eyes drifted to the window. The parking lot of their apartment complex was visible from here. He remembered that night, months ago, when he'd made the desperate decision to steal. The memory made him sick now. No, he whispered to himself. Not again. Lily munched happily on her lunch, completely oblivious to her father's internal struggle. Jacob watched her, his heart aching. She deserved better than this uncertainty, better than a father who couldn't keep it together. The afternoon dragged on. Jacob went through the motions of their daily routine, cleaning up after lunch, reading stories, playing with blocks. But his mind kept circling back to their situation, like a moth drawn to a flame. He thought about calling his sister, asking if they could stay with her for a while. But the idea of admitting failure, of showing up on her doorstep with nothing, it was too much. He'd worked so hard to prove he could do this on his own. Evening came, and with it, the weight of reality settled even heavier on his shoulders. Lily played in the living room, arranging her stuffed animals in a neat row on the carpet. Jacob sat on the couch, watching her. She looked so peaceful, so content. She trusted him completely to take care of her, to provide for her. The television droned quietly in the background, but Jacob barely heard it. His eyes were fixed on his daughter, his mind a storm of worry and self-doubt. How had he ended up here again? What kind of father couldn't hold on to a job? The questions circled endlessly, each one cutting deeper than the last. Lily picked up her favorite teddy bear and brought it to him, climbing onto the couch. "Bear hug, Data," she said, pressing the stuffed animal against his chest. Jacob wrapped his arms around both Lily and the bear, holding them close. She snuggled against him, yawning slightly. The trust in her eyes, the complete faith she had in him, it was both a comfort and a torture. As the sun began to set outside their window, Jacob sat there, still holding his daughter. She'd fallen asleep now, her small body warm against his chest. The teddy bear had slipped to the floor, forgotten. The apartment was quiet except for Lily's soft breathing and the muted sounds of traffic outside. Jacob stared into the growing darkness, feeling more lost than he had in months. The security he'd built, the future he'd started to see for himself and Lily, it all seemed to be slipping through his fingers like sand. He looked down at his sleeping daughter's face, peaceful and untroubled. She had no idea that their world had just been turned upside down again. No idea that her father was sitting here, feeling like a complete failure, with no clear path forward. The worst part was knowing that tomorrow he'd have to start over. Again. But how? Where? The questions loomed large in the darkening room, with no answers in sight. Jacob stared at his laptop screen, his eyes burning from hours of scrolling through job listings. The dim light of his small apartment kitchen cast shadows across the scattered papers around him, resumes, cover letters, and rejection emails he'd printed out. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, forgotten in the desperate search for work. Duh. Lily's voice carried from the living room where she played with her blocks. The sound of her happiness made his chest ache. He clicked Submit Application for what felt like the 100th time this week. The automated response popped up immediately. Thank you for your interest. We will review your application and contact you if your qualifications match our needs. Jacob rubbed his tired eyes. He knew what that meant. Another dead end. The rent was due in 3 days, and his bank account showed a balance that wouldn't even cover half of it. The refrigerator hummed in the background, nearly empty except for some milk for Lily and a few eggs. Just one break, he whispered to himself. That's all I need. His phone showed no missed calls from the dozens of applications he'd submitted over the past few days. Each morning, he'd wake up hoping for good news, only to face another day of silence. The factory where he used to work wasn't hiring. The local shops all had the same response. We'll keep your application on file. Lily toddled into the kitchen, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. Hungry, Dada? Jacob forced a smile. Let's see what we can find, Princess. He opened the cabinets, moving around the few remaining items. There was enough for Lily, but he'd have to skip dinner again tonight. As he prepared Lily's meal, his mind wandered to his mother-in-law, Margaret. She'd always been good to Lily, even after her daughter, Jacob's ex-wife, had left them. Margaret had a stable home, a comfortable life. Maybe Lily would be better off there, at least until he could get back on his feet. The thought made him sick to his stomach. His phone buzzed, and for a moment, hope flared in his chest. But it was just another bill reminder. The stack of unopened envelopes on the table seemed to mock him. Electric, water, credit card, they all wanted their money, and he had none to give. After putting Lily to bed that night, Jacob sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of his failure. He'd been so close to turning things around at Walmart. Charlie had believed in him, had seen something worth saving. Now he couldn't even look the man in the eye. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Charlie's number several times throughout the evening. But pride stopped him from making the call. What would he say? Sorry, I failed. Can you help me again? The thought made his cheeks burn with shame. The next morning brought more rejections. Jacob walked through the neighborhood, going door to door at local businesses, but everyone gave him the same sympathetic look and empty promises to keep his information on file. By afternoon, his feet ached and his spirit was crushed. He picked up Lily from the neighbor who watched her during his job searches, paying her with the last $20 in his wallet. Any luck today? She asked kindly. Jacob shook his head, unable to meet her eyes. Back in the apartment, he watched Lily play with her toys, the same ones she'd had for months because he couldn't afford new ones. She deserved better than this, better than him. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and dialed Margaret's number. It rang 3 times before she answered. Jacob? Is everything all right? He swallowed hard. Margaret, I need to ask you something. The words stuck in his throat. Could you? He couldn't finish the sentence. What is it, Jacob? He watched Lily stack her blocks, completely focused on her task. She knocked them down and giggled, starting over again with determined concentration. Never mind, he said quietly. I'm sorry to bother you. He hung up before she could respond. The sun set, casting long shadows across the apartment. Jacob sat on the couch, holding Lily's stuffed elephant, the one she couldn't sleep without. She'd had it since she was born, a gift from her mother before she left. The worn fabric felt soft in his hands, and he could see where he'd stitched up tears and washed away stains over the years. Bills covered the coffee table in front of him, their due dates circled in red. Final notices, disconnection warnings, eviction threats. Each one represented another failure, another step toward losing everything he'd worked for. He pressed the stuffed elephant to his face, breathing in the familiar scent that reminded him of Lily's bedtime hugs. The thought of sending her away, even temporarily, felt like a knife in his heart. But what kind of father was he, if he couldn't even keep a roof over her head? From her room came the soft sound of Lily's steady breathing as she slept, unaware of the weight crushing her father's shoulders. Jacob stared at the bills, then at the elephant in his hands, caught between impossible choices and fading hope. The lights of passing cars swept across the ceiling, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Jacob sat in the growing darkness, clutching his daughter's toy, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly, and how, or if, he would ever find his way back. The phone's harsh ring cut through the silence of Jacob's apartment. He glanced at the screen, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Charlie's name. For a moment, his thumb hovered over the reject button. The shame of being laid off still burned fresh in his mind. Lily played quietly in the corner with her worn teddy bear, humming a made-up tune. The sight of her gave him the courage to answer. Hello? His voice came out rougher than he intended. Jacob. Charlie's warm voice filled the line. I've been watching you. Jacob's shoulders tensed. Mr. Whitmore, I believe in you, Charlie continued, his tone earnest. I've got an opportunity for you. Jacob sank into his kitchen chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The last opportunity Charlie had given him had ended in failure. His chest tightened at the memory. I appreciate the thought, sir, but hear me out, son. There was something different in Charlie's voice now, a quiet determination that made Jacob pause. I want you to manage one of my stores. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Jacob's mouth went dry. Manage? A whole store? Store number 47. It's not one of our biggest locations, but it has potential, just like you. Jacob watched Lily stack her blocks, knocking them down with squeals of delight. His mind raced with all the ways he could fail again. I don't know, Mr. Whitmore. I was just stocking shelves before. Managing a whole store, You're more than just a shelf stocker, Jacob. I've seen how you work, how you care about doing things right. That's not something you can teach." The sincerity in Charlie's voice made Jacob's eyes burn. "But what if I mess up? What if—" "We all mess up," Charlie interrupted gently. "The question is, what do we do after? You've shown me that already. When you were caught stealing that bread, you could have run. Instead, you faced it. When I offered you charity, you chose to work instead. That's the kind of character I need in my managers." Jacob stood up, pacing the small kitchen. His reflection in the window looked tired, uncertain. "It's a big responsibility." "It is," Charlie agreed. "But you've been handling big responsibilities since Lily was born. Being a single father? That's harder than managing any store." Lily looked up at the sound of her name, giving Jacob a toothy grin. His heart swelled. "The position comes with full benefits," Charlie continued. "Health insurance, retirement plan, educational assistance, and the salary." He named a figure that made Jacob grip the counter for support. That's more than I've ever made, because it's a serious position. I'm not doing this out of charity, Jacob. I need someone I can trust. Someone who understands what it means to work hard and care about people." Jacob closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The empty fridge, the stolen bread, the shame of not being able to provide for his daughter, but also the pride he'd felt working his way up, learning new skills, earning respect. "I'll need to train you, of course," Charlie said. "It won't be easy. There's a lot to learn about inventory management, staff scheduling, budgeting, but I'll be there every step of the way." Lily toddled over to Jacob, wrapping her arms around his legs. He picked her up, holding her close as she played with his collar. "Why me?" he asked finally. "There must be more qualified people. Qualifications can be earned. Character is built over time. You've shown me who you are, Jacob. Now, it's time to show yourself." Jacob looked around his small apartment, the stack of unpaid bills on the table, the worn furniture, the empty pantry. Then he looked at Lily, her innocent face full of trust. "When do I start?" The words came out before he could second-guess himself. He could hear the smile in Charlie's voice. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock sharp. We'll start with the basics and work our way up." After hanging up, Jacob sat at the kitchen table, Lily secure in his lap. The future stretched out before him, full of possibilities and challenges. It was terrifying and exciting all at once. "I'm going to make it, Lily," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her curls. "I'll give you the life you deserve." Jacob stood in front of the Walmart store at 5:30 a.m., keys trembling slightly in his hand. The parking lot was empty, except for a few early morning employees waiting by the entrance. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity and uncertainty as they watched their new manager approach. "Good morning, everyone," Jacob said, trying to keep his voice steady as he unlocked the door. His stomach churned with nervous energy. Just weeks ago, he'd been stocking shelves alongside people like them. Now he was their boss. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed to life. Jacob made his way to his new office, a small room with a desk and computer that felt impossibly large compared to his old workspace in the stockroom. He sat down and pulled out the manual Charlie had given him, filled with notes from their training sessions. The morning meeting was his first real test. 20 pairs of eyes stared at him as he cleared his throat. "I know this is a big change for all of us," he began. "I started here just like many of you, unloading trucks and stocking shelves. I'm not here to turn everything upside down. I'm here to work with you, to make this store the best it can be." Sarah, a cashier who'd been there for 12 years, raised her hand. "What about our schedules? The last manager kept changing them without notice." Jacob remembered how hard it had been juggling work and caring for Lily. "I promised to post schedules 2 weeks in advance. If changes are needed, we'll discuss them together. Family comes first. I understand that better than most." The tension in the room eased slightly. A few employees nodded in approval. Throughout that first week, Jacob threw himself into learning every aspect of store management. He studied inventory reports late into the night after putting Lily to bed. During the day, he walked the floor, watching, listening, and learning from his team. When the freezer broke down on his third day, Jacob didn't hesitate. He rolled up his sleeves and helped the staff move perishables to the backup unit. "My dad was a mechanic," he told Tom, one of the stockers, as they worked side by side. "He always said actions speak louder than words." By the end of the second week, small changes began to show. The break room, once cluttered and dreary, was clean and organized. Jacob had brought in a coffee maker and kept it stocked. It's not much, he'd said, but everyone deserves a decent cup of coffee during their break. He instituted an open-door policy, making time to listen to concerns and ideas from every employee. When Maria, a young mother working as a cashier, struggled with childcare, Jacob adjusted her schedule to accommodate her needs. "We're all in this together," he told her, thinking of his own challenges with Lily. The store's numbers began to improve. Charlie's weekly check-ins became moments of quiet pride rather than anxiety. "You're doing well, Jacob," Charlie said during one visit. "But remember, it's not just about the numbers. It's about the people." Those words stuck with Jacob. When he caught a teenage employee stealing food during his shift, instead of firing him immediately, Jacob sat down with him. The boy's story was painfully familiar. A struggling single mother, empty cupboards at home. Jacob set him up with extra shifts and connected his family with local food assistance programs. "Why didn't you fire me?" the teenager asked. Jacob looked at him steadily. "Because someone once gave me a second chance when I needed it most." The days were long, and the responsibilities were heavy. Jacob often found himself double-checking inventory reports while eating dinner with Lily, or answering emergency calls from employees on his rare days off. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was building something meaningful. His team began to respond to his leadership style. The morning meetings became more engaging, with employees offering suggestions and volunteering for extra responsibilities. Even Sarah, who'd been skeptical at first, started staying late to help train new cashiers. 1 month into his new role, Jacob noticed a change in the store's atmosphere. Customers commented on the improved service. Employees smiled more. The store felt different, more like a community than just a workplace. After a particularly busy Saturday, Jacob stayed behind to help clean up a major spill in aisle 7. As he mopped alongside the evening crew, one of the workers said, "You know, you're nothing like our old manager. He wouldn't be caught dead doing this kind of work." Jacob smiled, remembering his own days of mopping floors. "We're all in this together," he replied, his standard response becoming more true with each passing day. That evening, after everyone had left, Jacob stood in front of the store's large windows. His reflection stared back at him. The same face, but somehow different. The desperate man who had once stolen bread seemed like a stranger now. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Charlie checking in on him. Jacob looked at his reflection once more, noting the tired but satisfied look in his eyes. He'd worked harder in the past month than ever before, but it was different now. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving something to himself, to Lily, to everyone who believed in him. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Charlie. "I won't let you down." Jacob's first week as manager had been going smoothly until Sarah, his inventory supervisor, rushed into his office early Tuesday morning. Her face was pinched with worry as she dropped a stack of reports on his desk. "We've got a problem," she said, pointing to the numbers. "Our stock levels are critically low in 3 major departments. The weekend sale cleaned us out, and the automatic reorder system glitched. We're looking at empty shelves by tomorrow if we don't do something fast." Jacob's heart raced as he scanned the reports. Household essentials, electronics, and grocery, all running dangerously low. The regional office expected them to hit their weekly sales targets, and empty shelves meant lost revenue. He took a deep breath, remembering Charlie's words during their training sessions. A manager's true worth shows in how they handle crisis moments. "Let me see the supplier contact list," Jacob said, keeping his voice calm despite the anxiety building in his chest. Sarah handed him another folder, and he quickly flipped through it. Charlie had taught him about building relationships with suppliers, emphasizing that personal connections could make all the difference. "Get Tom and Maria from receiving to do a complete inventory count," Jacob instructed. "I need exact numbers before I make these calls." Sarah nodded and hurried out. Jacob spent the next hour on the phone, negotiating with suppliers. He'd learned from Charlie that honesty combined with determination often opened doors. "Look, I know this is short notice," he told one supplier, "but we've got a strong track record of payment, and I'm willing to pay express shipping costs. Can you help me out?" By mid-morning, Jacob had secured promises for emergency deliveries from 3 major suppliers. It would cost extra, but it was better than losing sales and disappointing customers. He gathered his team in the break room to brief them on the situation. "Okay, everyone," he said, looking at the concerned faces around him. We've got trucks coming in throughout the day. I need all hands on deck to unload and stock as quickly as possible." He assigned teams and organized shifts to ensure continuous coverage. The first truck arrived just before noon. Jacob rolled up his sleeves and joined his team on the floor, helping to unload boxes and stock shelves. Sweat dripped down his back as he worked alongside his employees, just as he had done weeks before. But now, he was coordinating their efforts, making sure everything moved efficiently. "You don't have to help with the heavy lifting," Maria said as they worked side by side. "That's not usually what managers do." Jacob smiled as he broke down an empty box. "Maybe not, but it's what this manager does. We're all in this together." Throughout the afternoon, more trucks arrived. Jacob juggled between helping on the floor and managing the logistics from his office. He kept in constant communication with his team leads, solving problems as they arose. When one delivery was delayed by traffic, he quickly reorganized the stocking schedule to keep everyone productive. The store buzzed with activity. Customers watched curiously as teams of employees efficiently restocked shelves. Jacob made sure to thank each worker personally for their extra effort, remembering how much it had meant to him when managers had shown appreciation for his work. By closing time, the crisis had been averted. The shelves were stocked, and the sales figures for the day had actually exceeded expectations. Jacob's team gathered in the break room, tired but proud of what they'd accomplished. "Great work today, everyone," Jacob said, passing out sodas from the vending machine. "This could have been a disaster, but you all stepped up. Thank you." After the last employee left, Jacob sat in his office, looking at the final inventory reports. The numbers were good, better than good actually. They'd not only avoided a shortage, but had positioned themselves well for the rest of the week. With tired fingers, he dialed Charlie's number. Despite the late hour, Charlie answered on the second ring. "Jacob? Everything okay?" "Yes, sir," Jacob replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "We had a close call with inventory today, but we managed to turn it around." He explained the situation and how he'd handled it. "I knew you could do it," Charlie replied, his voice warm with pride. "You took everything we talked about and put it into action. That's exactly what I was hoping to see." The approval in Charlie's voice made Jacob smile, knowing he'd truly earned his place. He thought about how far he'd come from that desperate night with the stolen bread. Now he was the one making sure shelves were stocked so other families wouldn't go without. Sarah poked her head into his office. "The final truck just finished unloading. We're all set for tomorrow." Jacob gave her a thumbs up. "Charlie, I've got to go handle the last details here. Thanks for everything." "Keep up the good work, Jacob. I'm proud of you." Jacob hung up the phone, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. He gathered his things, ready to head home to Lily. Today had proved something, not just to Charlie or his team, but to himself. He was more than his past mistakes. He was a leader, and he was good at it. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Jacob's office as he reviewed the latest sales figures. His store had been performing well for the past few months, and he felt a growing sense of pride in what his team had accomplished. Pictures of Lily decorated his desk, her bright smile reminding him of why he worked so hard. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Charlie. "Jacob, we need to talk." Charlie's voice was heavy with concern. "Can you come to the regional office this afternoon?" During the drive to the office, Jacob's mind raced with possibilities. When he arrived, Charlie's usually warm office felt cold and formal. The older man sat behind his desk, looking tired and worn. "The economy's taken another hit," Charlie began, his fingers drumming nervously on a stack of papers. "Our investors are pulling back, and we're facing some serious financial pressure. We need to close some stores to stay afloat." Jacob's stomach dropped. "How many stores?" 10 in this region alone." Charlie pushed a document across the desk. "Your store. It's on the list." The words hit Jacob like a physical blow. His store had been improving, but it wasn't enough. He thought about his employees Sarah from inventory, who was putting her daughter through college, Tom, who'd just bought his first house, Maria, who worked 2 jobs to support her elderly parents. "How long do we have?" Jacob asked, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "The board meets in 3 weeks to make the final decision." Charlie leaned forward. "I've fought for your store, Jacob. I believe in you. But we need more than just belief right now. We need results." Back at his store, Jacob called an emergency meeting with his management team. The break room fell silent as he shared the news. He saw the fear in their eyes, The same fear he'd felt when he'd lost his factory job. "Listen," Jacob said, standing tall despite his inner turmoil. "I know this is scary, but we're not going down without a fight. I need everyone's ideas, no matter how small." The team brainstormed for hours. Sarah suggested partnering with local schools for supply drives. Tom proposed extending store hours to capture late-night shoppers. Maria mentioned her connections with local Hispanic communities, suggesting bilingual signage and cultural products to attract new customers. Jacob worked late into the night, crunching numbers and developing strategies. He remembered Charlie's lessons about business fundamentals and applied them with desperate determination. They couldn't just increase sales, they needed to cut costs and improve efficiency too. The next day, Jacob implemented their new plans. He personally worked alongside his team, helping stock shelves, greeting customers, and solving problems. The store buzzed with renewed energy as everyone pulled together. Days turned into weeks of intense work. Jacob barely saw Lily except at bedtime, relying heavily on his neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez for childcare. The guilt ate at him, but he knew this was temporary. It had to be. Their efforts started showing results. Sales increased by 15% in the first week. Customer feedback improved dramatically. The store looked better than ever, with full shelves and engaged employees. But Jacob couldn't celebrate yet. They needed to maintain this momentum. One evening, while reviewing the day's numbers, Jacob received an email from the regional office. The board meeting had been moved up. They would decide the store's fate in just 2 days. That night, Jacob sat in Lily's room, watching her sleep peacefully in her small bed. Her favorite stuffed elephant was tucked under her arm, and her dark curls spread across the pillow like a halo. The sight of her innocent face made his chest ache. He thought about everything that had led him to this moment. The desperate theft of bread, Charlie's unexpected kindness, the opportunities he'd been given. He couldn't let it all slip away. Too many people were counting on him now. Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about cookies. Jacob smiled despite his exhaustion and gently stroked her hair. Looking at his daughter, he felt his determination solidify into something unbreakable. "I'll do whatever it takes," he whispered, the words both a promise and a prayer in the quiet room. The moonlight cast shadows across the carpet as Jacob sat there, his mind already working on tomorrow's challenges. He would fight for his store, his employees, and most importantly, for the future he wanted to give his daughter. The road ahead would be difficult, but he wasn't the same man who had once stolen bread in desperation. He was stronger now, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. Jacob sat in his office late one evening, surrounded by spreadsheets and sales reports. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he rubbed his tired eyes. Despite all his efforts over the past weeks, the numbers weren't improving. The store's performance remained flat, and he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. He picked up a framed photo of Lily from his desk, her toothy grin usually giving him strength. But tonight, doubt crept in like a shadow. "Am I really cut out for this?" he whispered to himself. The store felt eerily quiet after hours. Walking through the empty aisles, Jacob noticed small details that suddenly seemed overwhelming. Shelves that needed restocking, displays that needed updating, seasonal items that weren't moving fast enough. Each observation felt like another mark against him. His phone buzzed. Charlie's name appeared on the screen, making his stomach tighten. He answered with a hesitant, "Hello? Jacob, you're still at the store, aren't you?" Charlie's voice was warm but knowing. "Yeah, I am. Just trying to figure things out." Jacob's voice cracked slightly. "The numbers aren't where they should be, Charlie. I've tried everything I can think of, but nothing seems to work. Meet me at the diner across the street in 15 minutes, Charlie said. "Sounds like you could use a break and a cup of coffee." The fluorescent lights of the all-night diner cast a harsh glow across their booth. Jacob stirred his coffee absently, while Charlie watched him with patient eyes. "I'm failing," Jacob finally said, the words burning in his throat. "After everything you've done for me, I'm letting you down. Maybe I'm just not management material." Charlie leaned back in his seat, his weathered face thoughtful. "You know what I see when I look at these numbers?" He tapped the reports Jacob had brought. "I see a leader who cares enough to stay late, who's worried about his team, who's taking responsibility. That's not failure, Jacob. That's leadership." "But the sales," Jacob started. "Numbers go up, Numbers go down, Charlie interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. In my 65 years, I've learned that success isn't just about hitting targets. It's about perseverance. It's about getting up every morning and facing whatever challenges come your way. Jacob looked up from his coffee, meeting Charlie's steady gaze. You remember when I first caught you on those security cameras? Charlie asked. I saw something in you that day, a father who would do anything for his daughter. That same determination is what you need right now. Your team needs it. But how do I turn things around? Jacob asked. Charlie smiled. By remembering why you're here, by leading with your heart, just like you've always done. Your team doesn't just need a manager, Jacob. They need someone who believes in them as much as I believed in you. They talked for another hour, Charlie sharing stories of his own struggles and triumphs. With each story, Jacob felt his perspective shifting. The numbers were important, yes, but they weren't everything. Back in his office, Jacob looked at his team's schedule for the next day. Each name represented someone with their own struggles, their own dreams. He thought about Tom, who'd shown him how to use the register in those early days. Sarah, a single mom like him, working hard to provide for her kids. Mike, putting himself through college with his paycheck. He began writing, creating a new plan. This time, instead of focusing solely on sales targets, he thought about his people. How could he help them succeed? How could he make them feel as valued as Charlie had made him feel? The next morning, Jacob arrived early. He straightened his tie, checked his reflection in his office window, and took a deep breath. His team would be gathering for their morning meeting soon, and for the first time in weeks, he felt ready to truly lead them. As his employees filed into the break room, Jacob noticed their tired faces, their worried glances. They knew about the store's struggles too. But today would be different. Today, he would show them what Charlie had shown him, that they were more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. Jacob stood before his team, feeling a new sense of purpose surge through him. The doubt that had plagued him the night before had transformed into determination. He looked at each face in the room, remembering their individual stories, their challenges, their small victories. These weren't just employees. They were his responsibility, his team, his second family. He cleared his throat, ready to share his new vision with them. The room fell quiet, all eyes on him, waiting to hear what their manager had to say. Jacob straightened his shoulders, Charlie's words echoing in his mind. Lead with your heart. And that's exactly what he intended to do. Jacob stared at the whiteboard in the break room, his marker hovering over the surface. Around him, his team sat in plastic chairs, some looking skeptical, others curious. The words, "Community First," were written in bold letters at the top. I know we've been struggling, Jacob said, turning to face his employees. But I think I know how we can turn things around. This store isn't just a building, it's part of the neighborhood. Tom, one of the senior employees, leaned forward. What are you thinking, boss? Jacob drew a quick diagram. We start with local events, family fun days, cooking demonstrations, free workshops. Make this place more than just somewhere to shop. Make it somewhere people want to be. Lisa, the former manager who had trained Jacob, nodded slowly. That could work. We've got that empty space near the garden center we could use. Over the next few days, Jacob and his team transformed the unused area into a community space. They set up folding tables and chairs, brought in some plants to make it welcoming, and hung bright banners announcing their first event, Family Saturday, free face painting and story time. The first Saturday was quiet. Only a handful of families showed up, but Jacob made sure each child left with a balloon and a smile. He read stories himself, making funny voices that made Lily giggle from her spot in the front row. Don't get discouraged, Charlie told him during their weekly call. Good things take time to grow. Jacob took those words to heart. Each week, they tried something new. They hosted a local gardening expert who taught people how to start their own vegetable gardens. They organized a cooking demonstration using products from their grocery section. They even set up a job skills workshop for teenagers looking for their first jobs. Slowly, word began to spread. The empty space started filling up with more faces. People who came for the events stayed to shop. Regular customers began looking forward to the weekly programs. One morning, as Jacob walked through the store, he overheard two women talking in the cereal aisle. Did you see they're doing a back-to-school supply drive next week? one said. My kids loved the story time last month. It's nice having somewhere to take them that doesn't cost anything. The other woman nodded. And the staff is so friendly now. It feels different than before. Jacob smiled to himself, remembering how Charlie had told him that heart was what mattered most in this business. Now he understood what that meant. The sales numbers started to reflect the change. First, it was a small uptick, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Then the increase became steady, consistent. People weren't just coming to shop. They were coming back because they felt connected to the store and its people. Jacob's team noticed the difference too. The morning meetings became livelier, with employees offering their own ideas for community programs. Tom suggested partnering with the local food bank. Lisa organized a reading program with the elementary school down the street. One Tuesday afternoon, Charlie made a surprise visit. He walked through the store, observing the busy aisles and the friendly interactions between staff and customers. In the community space, a group of seniors was learning about technology from some high school volunteers. You've done something special here, Jacob, Charlie said, his eyes twinkling. You've made this more than a store. You've made it a home. Jacob felt his chest swell with pride. I had a good teacher. The monthly sales report confirmed what they could all feel. The store's performance had improved significantly. They weren't just meeting their targets, they were exceeding them. During the next team meeting, Jacob looked around at his employees, his family, really, and felt a surge of gratitude. I want to thank all of you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. When things were tough, you didn't give up. You believed in what we could do together. Lisa raised her coffee cup. To Jacob, the best boss we could ask for. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Jacob blushed, remembering the day he'd first walked into this store, desperate and ashamed. Now, he stood here as their leader, their friend, someone they trusted and respected. After the meeting, Jacob sat in his office, looking at a photo of Lily on his desk. She was growing so fast, and thanks to this job, he could give her everything she needed. But more than that, he was showing her what it meant to work hard, to care about others, to never give up. The intercom crackled. Manager to the front, please. Manager to the front. Jacob stood, straightening his name badge. Outside his office, the store hummed with activity. Customers chatting, carts rolling, children laughing. This was more than just a business turning around. This was a community coming together, and he was proud to be part of it. His team had gathered near the registers, waiting for him with a cake decorated with the words, "Thank you, Jacob." Someone had hung streamers from the ceiling, and there were balloons tied to the customer service desk. We wanted to celebrate, Tom explained, grinning. The district manager called. We're now the most improved store in the region. Jacob looked at the faces around him. People who had become more than just coworkers. They were a team that had faced challenges together and come out stronger. As they shared cake and traded jokes, Jacob felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Not just for the improved sales numbers or the successful programs, but for the family they had built here. A small hand tugged at his pants leg. He looked down to see Lily, who had just arrived with her babysitter for their daily lunch together. She reached up, and he lifted her into his arms. "Daddy's store?" she asked, pointing at the decorations. "No, sweetheart," he said, smiling at his team. "Our store. All of ours." The celebration continued around them, a testament to what they had achieved together. Jacob had done more than save a struggling store. Daisy. He had created a place where people belonged, where community mattered, where heart made all the difference. Jacob's hands trembled as he held the envelope Charlie had just handed him. The office felt smaller somehow, more intimate, as the weight of the moment settled around them. Charlie sat behind his desk, a warm smile spreading across his weathered face. "Go ahead, open it," Charlie encouraged, leaning forward slightly. Jacob carefully tore open the envelope, his heart pounding. When he pulled out the check, his eyes widened. The bonus was more than he'd made in 3 months at his old factory job. He blinked rapidly, wondering if he was seeing things correctly. "This is..." Jacob's voice cracked. "Charlie, I can't..." "You've earned every penny," Charlie interrupted firmly. "That store was struggling before you took over. Look at it now. The sales numbers are up 30%. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and customer complaints are down to almost zero. That's all you, Jacob." Jacob stared at the check, memories of empty refrigerators and overdue notices flashing through his mind. Just months ago, he'd been stealing bread to feed his daughter. Now, sitting in this office with a bonus check in his hand, it felt like a different lifetime. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Charlie stood up and walked around his desk, placing a firm hand on Jacob's shoulder. "You did the work, son. I just opened the door." Back at his apartment that evening, Jacob spread his bills across the kitchen table after putting Lily to bed. With careful determination, he began sorting them into piles. His hands moved with purpose now, no longer shaking with anxiety as they had so many times before. One by one, he wrote checks to clear his debts. The overdue electric bill that had kept him up at night, the medical bills from Lily's ear infection last winter, the back rent he still owed his landlord. With each envelope he sealed, Jacob felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. When he finished, there was still money left over. He sat back in his chair, stunned by the realization. For the first time in years, he had something to put aside, something to save. The next morning, Jacob opened a savings account. The bank teller smiled as she helped him set it up, explaining about interest rates and minimum balances. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. He thought about Lily's future, about college funds and birthday parties that wouldn't have to be celebrated on credit cards. During his lunch break at work, Jacob found himself browsing real estate listings on his phone. The houses weren't fancy, modest 3-bedroom ranches and small bungalows, but they were homes. Real homes, with yards where Lily could play and rooms they could paint whatever color they wanted. Dreaming big? Charlie's voice startled him. Jacob hadn't heard him approach the break room table. "Just looking," Jacob admitted, quickly putting his phone away. "Probably getting ahead of myself." Charlie pulled out a chair and sat down. "Nothing wrong with looking ahead. That's what leaders do." He paused, studying Jacob's face. "You know, when I first started out, I couldn't even imagine owning my own home. Seemed like something that happened to other people." Jacob nodded, understanding exactly what Charlie meant. "It still feels that way sometimes, like I'm waiting for everything to fall apart again." "That feeling fades," Charlie assured him. "Success isn't just about making money, Jacob. It's about believing you deserve good things when they come your way." That evening, Jacob picked Lily up from daycare earlier than usual. She squealed with delight when she saw him, running toward him with her arms outstretched. He scooped her up, breathing in the sweet smell of her hair. "Daddy," she giggled as he tickled her sides. "You're early." "That's right, princess. I thought we could go to the park before dinner." At the playground, Jacob watched Lily climb the jungle gym, her face lit up with joy. Other parents smiled and nodded at him, and he found himself smiling back without hesitation. The shame that had once clouded these interactions was gone. Later, back at their apartment, Jacob prepared dinner while Lily colored at the coffee table. The kitchen no longer felt like a place of stress and worry. The cabinets were full. The refrigerator hummed contentedly, stocked with fresh food. He glanced at his daughter, her little tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on her masterpiece. Her blonde curls caught the early evening light streaming through the window, creating a halo effect around her head. The sight brought tears to his eyes. Not tears of worry or desperation like before, but tears of gratitude and hope. He remembered the night he'd stolen that bread, how close he'd come to giving up, how different things might have been if Charlie hadn't seen something worth saving in him. Lily looked up from her drawing, catching him, watching her. "What's wrong, Daddy?" Jacob wiped his eyes quickly and smiled. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Everything's just right." He moved to the living room and sat down beside her on the floor, looking at her colorful drawing. "We're going to be okay," he whispered more to himself than to her. Lily nodded seriously, as if she understood the weight of his words, then went back to her coloring. Jacob watched her for a moment longer, his heart full. The future that had once seemed so dark and uncertain now held possibility. He could see it clearly. A home of their own, stability, the chance to give Lily everything she deserved. She hummed softly as she drew, a made-up tune that filled their small living room with joy. Jacob savored the moment, knowing that this feeling, this sense of peace and possibility, was worth every struggle, every moment of doubt, every step of the journey that had brought them here. Jacob stared through the large store windows at the gleaming new superstore across the street. Its grand opening banner fluttered in the morning breeze, and a steady stream of curious customers flowed through its automatic doors. The knot in his stomach tightened as he watched another one of his regular customers walk into the competitor's parking lot. Mr. Miller? Tom, one of his most reliable employees, appeared at his side. "The morning staff meeting is ready to start." Jacob nodded, pulling himself away from the window. In the break room, his team sat around the large table, their faces showing mixed expressions of concern and determination. They all knew what was at stake. "I won't sugarcoat it," Jacob began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "SuperSave's opening is going to impact us, but we've got something they don't have. We know our community." Sarah, who'd worked the checkout counter for 3 years, raised her hand. "I heard they're offering lower prices on almost everything." Jacob took a deep breath. "They might have lower prices, but we have relationships. Mrs. Chen has been buying her groceries here for 15 years. Mr. Rodriguez brings his grandkids here every Saturday for ice cream. We know their names, their stories, their preferences." He pulled out a notepad where he'd been jotting down ideas all night. "Starting today, we're going to focus on what makes us different. Tom, I want you to reorganize the produce section. Make it more accessible for our elderly customers who've complained about reaching the top shelves." Tom nodded, already making notes. "Sarah, you mentioned last week that some customers were asking about local products. Let's create a local favorites section. We'll partner with nearby farmers and small businesses." The energy in the room began to shift as Jacob assigned tasks to each team member, playing to their strengths and incorporating their suggestions. By the end of the meeting, the anxiety had transformed into determination. Over the next few days, Jacob worked alongside his team to implement their plans. He remembered Charlie's words about heart being the foundation of good business. They installed a small play area near the checkout counters, giving parents a moment of peace while shopping. They started offering free coffee in the mornings, creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere that made their store feel less like a business and more like a community hub. But the real challenge came when SuperSave launched their first major sale. Jacob watched his daily sales figures drop by 30%. That evening, he sat in his office, running numbers and trying to find a solution that wouldn't involve laying off any staff. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Maria, one of the checkout operators who'd been with the store for over a decade. "Mr. Miller, I had an idea," she said, slightly nervous. "You know how I keep track of our regular customers' birthdays? What if we started sending them personalized discount coupons? Nothing big, just enough to show we care." Jacob looked up from his paperwork, intrigued. "That's brilliant, Maria. We could expand it. Create a customer appreciation program that's actually personal, not just another points card." They worked late that night, developing a system that would make their regular customers feel valued. Maria knew almost everyone's preferences, which brands they liked, what they typically bought, even their favorite times to shop. The next week, they launched their Community First initiative. Every regular customer received a handwritten note thanking them for their loyalty, along with personalized discounts on their frequently purchased items. They started hosting weekly events, cooking demonstrations using products from their local vendors, story time for kids on Saturday mornings, and senior citizen discount days that included free coffee and cookies. The response was immediate. Customers who'd been drawn to SuperSave's flashy displays and rock-bottom prices started returning. They missed the friendly conversations with Maria, Tom's helpful produce recommendations, and the way Jacob always remembered to ask about their families. One morning, Jacob noticed Mrs. Chen, one of their oldest customers who'd been shopping at SuperSave lately, walking through their doors. Maria immediately greeted her by name and asked about her grandson's college graduation. Mrs. Chen's face lit up. "Oh, Maria, you remembered. Those other people, they don't even look at you when you check out. Here, it feels like family." As Jacob watched Mrs. Chen fill her cart with her usual items, plus some local honey from their new local favorites section, he felt a surge of pride. They weren't just competing on prices or selection. They were building something meaningful. Later that day, a young mother struggled with her shopping cart while trying to keep her toddler entertained. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped in to help, showing the child to their new play area while Tom assisted the mother with her shopping. The woman's relief was evident, and Jacob could see her tension melting away. The store had become more than just a place to buy groceries. It was a cornerstone of the community. Jacob saw it in the way elderly customers lingered over their morning coffee, chatting with neighbors they'd known for years. He noticed it in the smiles of children who dragged their parents to the Saturday morning story time, and in the grateful looks from busy professionals who appreciated the personal touch during their quick lunch break shopping. One particularly busy afternoon, Jacob helped an elderly gentleman reach a can from a high shelf. The man paused, leaning on his cart. "You know," he said, "that new place across the street, they've got all sorts of fancy gadgets and lower prices. But they don't have this." He gestured around at the warm atmosphere, the chatting customers, the helpful staff. "They don't have heart." Jacob was reminded of Charlie's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. As he watched the elderly gentleman make his way to the checkout counter, where Maria greeted him by name and asked about his wife's recovery from surgery, he knew they were going to be okay. A young woman approached the exit, her arms full of shopping bags. She turned back to wave at Tom, who had helped her find everything on her list. Her smile was genuine, reaching all the way to her eyes. Jacob knew without a doubt she would be back. Not because they had the lowest prices or the fanciest displays, but because they had something much more valuable. They had become part of her community. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Jacob's corner office, casting warm golden patches of light across his mahogany desk. He leaned back in his leather chair, a far cry from the folding chair he'd once sat on in his tiny apartment, and spread the quarterly sales reports before him like a treasure map. The numbers told a story he could hardly believe. His store had not only met its targets, but had become one of the top 3 performers in Charlie's entire network of over 500 locations across the country. Jacob picked up his coffee mug, a gift from his team last Christmas with "World's Best Boss" printed on the side, and took a slow sip. Through his office window, he could see the bustling store floor below. Customers moved through the aisles with purpose, employees restocked shelves with practiced efficiency, and the steady hum of commerce filled the air. It was a symphony of success that still amazed him after all these years. "Mr. Miller?" His assistant, Sarah, poked her head into the office, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun. She'd been with him for 2 years now, a recent college graduate who reminded him of himself when he'd first started, eager, hard-working, and determined to prove herself. "The morning staff meeting is about to start. Should I tell them you'll be right there?" Jacob smiled and gathered his papers, sliding them into a manila folder. "Tell them I'm on my way, Sarah, and thank you for organizing these reports so well. They make all the difference in how I present the information." Walking through the store toward the meeting room, Jacob's footsteps echoed softly on the polished linoleum floors. He couldn't help but notice how different everything felt from that desperate night years ago when he'd stolen a loaf of bread from these very aisles. The memory still haunted him sometimes, but now it served as a reminder of how far he'd traveled on this journey. The aisles were neat and perfectly organized, the shelves well stocked with everything from fresh produce to children's toys, and his employees greeted him with genuine warmth and respect as he passed. "Morning, Mr. Miller," called out Janet from the electronics section, where she was helping a customer compare tablet computers. "Great job on those new training programs. They're really making a difference." "Thank you, Janet. Keep up the excellent work," Jacob replied, pausing to straighten a display of phone cases that had been knocked askew. In the meeting room, his team of 15 sat waiting around the long conference table. These faces had become like family to him over the years. Tom, who'd first shown him how to work the register and had since been promoted to assistant manager. Lisa, who'd given him his first real chance and now served as his operations coordinator, and many others who'd joined along the way, each bringing their own stories of struggle and triumph. Jacob had learned to lead not just with his head, analyzing spreadsheets and profit margins, but with his heart, understanding that behind every employee was a person with dreams, fears, and responsibilities, just like his own. "Great numbers this quarter, everyone," Jacob began, his voice steady and confident as he opened the folder and pulled out the reports. "Our customer satisfaction ratings are the highest they've ever been, 94%, which puts us in the top tier company-wide. More importantly, our employee retention rate has improved by 30% over last year." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each team member. "But these numbers don't tell the whole story." "What they represent is the hard work, dedication, and care that each of you brings to this job every single day. You're not just moving products or processing transactions. You're helping families find what they need, often during some of their most challenging moments." After the meeting, Jacob returned to his office to find Charlie Whitmore waiting for him. settled comfortably in one of the guest chairs. The older man's silver hair was neatly combed, and he wore his characteristic navy blue suit, but his posture was relaxed, almost fatherly. Their relationship had evolved over the years into something that transcended business. It was closer to friendship, built on mutual respect and shared values. "Jacob," Charlie said warmly, rising to shake his hand with the firm grip that Jacob had come to associate with their most important conversations. "I've been looking at your performance reports for the past 6 months. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. You've transformed this location into something truly special." Jacob felt a flush of pride warm his chest, but he remained humble. "Thank you, Charlie. I couldn't have done it without the team, and without your guidance. Every lesson you taught me about leadership, about seeing the person behind the employee, it all makes sense now." Charlie leaned forward, his expression growing serious, the way it did when he was about to discuss something of significant importance. "That's exactly why I'm here today, Jacob. I want to offer you a regional management position. You'd oversee 10 stores across 3 states, including this one."
The salary would be substantial. We're talking about a 6-figure increase, and you'd have even more opportunities for growth within the company.
"Eventually, you could be looking at a vice president role." Jacob's heart skipped a beat, and he felt the same mixture of excitement and nervousness that had filled him during his first job interview years ago. The offer was more than he could have imagined when he'd first started, more than he'd ever dreamed possible during those dark nights when he'd counted pennies to buy groceries. But as he considered the implications, an image of Lily flashed through his mind. Not the toddler who'd once clung to his leg while he worried about their next meal, but the confident 7-year-old she'd become, thriving in school, involved in dance classes, and surrounded by friends in their stable neighborhood. "I'm honored, Charlie," Jacob said carefully, his voice thoughtful as he processed the magnitude of what was being offered. "This is the kind of opportunity that most people only dream about, but I need some time to think about it, to consider what it would mean for Lily and our life here." "Of course," Charlie replied, standing and straightening his jacket. "Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often, and I can't hold the position indefinitely." That evening, Jacob picked Lily up from her dance class at the community center, the same building where he'd once attended job training seminars during his darkest days. Her face lit up when she saw him through the glass doors, and she ran to him with the unbridled joy that only children can express, her dance bag bouncing against her hip with each step. "Daddy, watch what I learned today." She twirled in her pink leotard and black tights, her movements still awkward but full of enthusiasm and grace. Her instructor, Mrs. Henderson, waved from across the studio and gave Jacob a thumbs up, indicating that Lily was progressing beautifully. At home, as they sat at their kitchen table, the same sturdy oak table where he'd once stared at overdue bills by lamplight, calculating and recalculating numbers that never seemed to add up, Lily chattered about her day between bites of dinner. She told him about the spelling test she'd aced, the new friends she'd made at recess, and the upcoming school play where she'd been chosen to play a dancing flower. Jacob watched her animated expressions, her eyes bright with excitement and security, realizing that this simple moment was everything he'd ever wanted when he'd first held her as a frightened single father. "Daddy, are you listening?" Lily asked, waving her fork in the air to get his attention. "Of course, sweetheart. You were telling me about the play. A dancing flower sounds like the perfect part for you. Will you come watch me? It's next Friday night." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Jacob promised, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. The next morning, Jacob asked Charlie to meet him for coffee before work at the small cafe across from the store. It was the same place where Charlie had first explained the concept of compound interest and long-term investing, where Jacob had begun to understand that wealth wasn't just about money, but about building something lasting. The cafe was quiet in the early morning hours, with only the soft murmur of a few other early risers and the gentle hiss of the espresso machine providing background noise. "I've made my decision," Jacob said, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup and looking directly into Charlie's wise, patient eyes. "I'm grateful for the offer, Charlie, more grateful than I can express. It represents everything I once thought I wanted, but I want to stay where I am." Charlie's eyebrows rose slightly, his expression showing genuine surprise. "Are you sure, Jacob? It's a significant opportunity, One that could set you and Lily up for life. The financial security alone would be substantial. Jacob nodded, his conviction growing stronger as he spoke. I've learned something important over these past few years. Something you actually taught me without me realizing it at the time. Success isn't just about climbing higher or earning more money. It's about finding your place, the spot where you can do the most good, where you can make the biggest difference, and where you can be there for the people who matter most. A slow smile spread across Charlie's weathered face, the same expression Jacob had seen years ago when Charlie had first offered him a chance at redemption. You know, Jacob, that's exactly why I wanted to promote you. You understand what truly matters in this business and in life. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee and gazing out the window at the morning commuters hurrying past. But I respect your decision completely. Sometimes staying put is the bravest choice of all, especially when it means choosing love over ambition. I hope you understand, Jacob said, worried that he might be disappointing the man who'd given him everything. More than you know, Charlie replied. You're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you're meant to do. And Lily is lucky to have a father who understands that being present is more valuable than any promotion. That weekend, Jacob took Lily to their favorite park, the same sprawling green space where he'd once pushed her on the swings while wrestling with the darkest thoughts of his life. The spring air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of blooming dogwood trees and fresh-cut grass. The playground buzzed with the joyful sounds of children laughing, parents calling out encouragement, and the rhythmic squeak of swing sets in motion. Lily ran ahead to the swings, her favorite spot, her pigtails bouncing with each step and her light-up sneakers flashing pink and purple against the mulch. Push me high, Daddy. I want to touch the clouds. As Jacob positioned himself behind the swing and began pushing his daughter, each of her delighted squeals reminded him of how far they'd both traveled on this journey. The park was the same one he'd walked through during his darkest days, when he'd wondered if he was capable of being the father Lily deserved, when he'd seriously considered giving her up to her grandmother because he thought he was failing her. Now, it was a place of pure joy, of weekend traditions and precious memories that would last a lifetime. Higher, Daddy! I can see the whole world from up here! Lily called out, her voice filled with the kind of happiness that made Jacob's heart swell with pride and contentment. He watched as Lily eventually jumped off the swing with practiced ease and ran to join some friends by the elaborate climbing structure. Her social confidence amazed him. She made friends easily, included others naturally, and approached new challenges with enthusiasm rather than fear. His daughter was happy, healthy, and secure in a way that he once thought was impossible for a child from a broken home. Sitting on a nearby bench, the same bench where he'd once sat in despair, Jacob remembered Charlie's words from years ago. You've got something no one else has. Heart. He understood now that Charlie hadn't just given him a job that day, he'd given him the chance to discover his own strength, to build a life he could be proud of, and to prove that second chances were worth fighting for. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. There had been late nights studying management techniques, early mornings when he'd arrived at work before dawn to ensure everything was perfect, moments of self-doubt when he'd wondered if he was truly capable of leadership. But with each small success, each employee who trusted him, each satisfied customer, his confidence had grown like a tree, putting down deeper roots. Daddy, come play with us, Lily called from the top of the slide, waving enthusiastically. We're pretending to be pirates searching for treasure. Jacob stood up, brushing off his jeans, his heart full of a contentment he'd never known was possible. This was what success truly looked like, not a corner office in a distant city or a bigger title on a business card, but the simple joy of being present for these irreplaceable moments with his daughter. As he walked toward the playground equipment, ready to join in the pirate adventure, Jacob felt a deep sense of peace settle over him like a warm blanket. The park was filled with the sounds of families enjoying the weekend. Children laughing as they raced down slides, parents chatting on benches while keeping watchful eyes on their little ones. The rhythmic squeak of swing chains and the distant sound of a radio playing soft music from someone's picnic setup. For Jacob, it was the perfect soundtrack to a life he'd once only dreamed about during his loneliest nights. A life built on second chances, hard work, unwavering determination, and the life-changing belief of someone who had seen potential where others might have seen only desperation and failure. As he climbed up the playground structure to join Lily's pirate crew, Jacob smiled at the irony. He'd once thought treasure was something you found in distant places, something that required great sacrifice and struggle to obtain. Now, he knew better. The real treasure had been right here all along, in the laughter of his daughter, in the respect of his colleagues, in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, and in the knowledge that he'd become the man he'd always wanted to be. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jacob Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.